They said no one knocked on doors during a snowstorm unless it was death or desperation. It was the winter of 1876, and the sky over Willow Creek had turned white for 2 straight days. Snow blanketed the Montana frontier like a burial shroud, covering wagons, fences, even the church steeple. The wind didn't howl anymore. It growled, like something waiting to pounce. Inside a lonely cabin on the hill, Margaret Whitlow, 53, sat by the fire stitching a torn wool coat. Her husband Caleb had been gone 10 years, buried in Confederate gray. The town had moved on. She hadn't. She was halfway through threading a patch when she heard it. Tap. She paused, head tilted. Nothing. Tap. Tap. Not the door. The barn. Margaret slowly stood, her knees cracking like dry twigs. She grabbed Caleb's rusted shotgun, still loaded, still loyal. With a thick scarf over her gray-streaked hair, she pushed into the night. The cold stabbed like knives. Every breath hung like ghost smoke. The barn sat just 30 yards from the cabin, but that walk felt like a mile. When she opened the door, her breath caught. A young native girl, barely more than a child, slumped against a hay bale. She was soaked, shivering, her long black hair tangled with ice. One hand clutched her round belly. The other held a knife she clearly didn't know how to use. Blood streaked down her leg. Margaret didn't speak. The girl's lips moved. "Please, don't let them find me." In the distance, hoofbeats, faint but growing louder. Margaret didn't ask questions. She simply stepped forward, took the girl's arm, and helped her deeper into the barn shadows. She tossed a blanket over her and whispered, "Stay quiet. Don't move." Then she shut the barn doors, bolted them, and turned out the lantern. Seconds later, 3 riders galloped past the hill, fast, mean, and carrying rifles. One stopped just outside the fence line. He looked up at the cabin, squinting. Inside, Margaret's heart pounded. The girl whimpered behind the hay. After a long pause, the rider spat in the snow and rode on. Margaret waited another minute, then 2. Finally, she breathed. She'd taken in a stranger, a girl the town would hang without a trial. But something inside her had shifted, something that had been asleep for years. She didn't know then that the child inside that girl would one day return to Willow Creek, and when he did, every lie, every sin, and every secret in that town would burn to the ground. She fired. Silas staggered back. Then again, a second shot to the chest. He fell to his knees, looking almost relieved. "They'll replace me," he whispered, blood staining his shirt. "Men like me never stay gone." Clara knelt beside him. "Then I'll keep writing stories that burn you down again and again." He smiled once faintly, then fell back into the dust and the silence. It was over. Really over. 3 months later, Redwood had changed. The Whitmore Chapel had been rebuilt, its windows stained with scenes not of saints, but of justice. Daniel now taught reading to Ranch. Kids Everett ran the town post, and Clara, she bought back her family land. She built a home there, planted peach trees, named her horse Miriam. And every Sunday she read from Hank's journal on the chapel steps, not just to remember the past, but to protect the future. Final line. Sometimes the truth doesn't gallop in with trumpets. Sometimes it walks in with dust on its boots and blood on its hands. And it still chooses to stand tall. Morning came late in Montana winters. The sun barely peeked over the frost-bitten hills when Margaret stepped into the barn again, shotgun in one hand, coffee tin in the other. Steam rose from the girl's body as she lay half-covered in horse blankets, her skin still clammy from the night's cold. But she was alive. Barely. The girl flinched when she saw Margaret. Her eyes darted to the knife she'd dropped in the straw. Margaret didn't reach for it. She knelt instead, setting the coffee near the girl's trembling hands. "You're safe," Margaret said gently. "For now." The girl hesitated, then took the cup. Her fingers wrapped around it slowly, like she hadn't held warmth in days. "What's your name?" Margaret asked. No answer. "Can you speak English?" The girl nodded. Barely. "Name?" A whisper. "Nayeli." It sounded like wind through pine trees, soft, wild. "Where's your family?" Nayeli looked down. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she lifted her shirt just enough to reveal a large bruise blooming across her ribs. Margaret's stomach turned. "They took you?" she asked. Nayeli nodded. "And now they're hunting you." Another nod. Then, for the first time, the girl spoke more than one word. "They said, if the baby comes, they'll drown it. Said, it's not white, not his, not welcome." Margaret's breath caught. She stood slowly and paced the barn. Her hands were shaking. This wasn't just a runaway. This was a girl torn from her people, assaulted, left to bleed in the snow, and now carrying a child that someone, likely a powerful someone in town, wanted erased. The silence was broken by a crow's cry outside. It perched on the fence post like an omen. Margaret stared at it, her mind racing. Willow Creek had its own quiet laws, ones written in blood, not ink. If word got out Nayeli was here, they wouldn't just kill her, they'd burn Margaret's house to the ground. Still, something inside the old woman burned hotter than fear. She turned back to Nayeli. "That baby's going to live, and so are you. Not because I'm brave, but because I'm too damn old to let monsters win." Nayeli blinked at her, stunned. For the first time, Margaret saw something flicker in her eyes. Hope. But outside, hidden behind the tree line, a fourth rider watched through a spyglass. He hadn't ridden off with the others. He'd stayed, and what he saw, he'd take back to the man who started it all. Margaret barely slept that night. Every creak of the wind, every groan of the floorboards kept her awake. Her shotgun rested. On her lap, boots still on, eyes fixed on the window. The barn was only 30 yards away. And if someone came for Nayeli, they'd likely come through her first. At first light, she wrapped herself in her heaviest shawl and trudged through the thick, powdery snow toward the barn. Her breath fogged in the cold air, and a knot twisted in her gut. But Nayeli was still there, alive, resting, though pale and weak. Margaret brought her warm bread and broth, helped her sit upright, and dabbed the sweat from her brow. "You need a doctor," Margaret muttered, but she knew she couldn't risk it. The town doc, Old Man Halston, would run straight to the sheriff if he saw a native girl on her land. Nayeli's lips trembled. "You should turn me in." Margaret shook her head. "Too late. I already chose." That's when she saw them. Boot, prints outside the barn window, not hers, not from yesterday. Fresh. Margaret's heart sank. She followed them back behind the trees, quiet, tense, and found something chilling. A half-smoked cigar pressed into the bark of a pine. Only one man. In Willow Creek smoked those godless things, Deputy Silas Burke. The kind of man who'd been wearing a badge long before the war ended and never stopped treating natives like animals. She grabbed the cigar and crushed it into the snow. "He knows," she whispered. "Or he's guessing." "Close enough." Back at the house, Margaret started packing jerky, flour, and a hunting knife. She tossed extra blankets into a canvas sack and grabbed a worn leather pouch from the drawer. Inside it, a silver locket and a piece of folded paper she hadn't looked at in 10 years. "You're not safe here anymore," she told Nayeli. "Neither of us are." Nayeli's eyes widened. "Where will we go?" Margaret looked out toward the mountains where the snow-capped peaks cut the horizon. "There's a place west of here. A cabin no one remembers. Caleb and I used to go there before the war. It's far, but if we leave by dusk, we can be gone before anyone knows." "But the baby?" Margaret met her gaze. "Then we move fast, because if we stay, that child never sees the light of day." Outside, the sun rose slowly. painting the sky in bloody hues. Unseen on a hill just beyond the tree line, Deputy Burke watched them with cold eyes. He didn't draw his gun. Not yet. He smiled. The sun was barely a whisper above the horizon when Margaret threw a heavy quilt over Niley's shoulders and helped her into the wagon. The horses, Buck and Myrtle, sensed the tension, snorting, stomping, restless. They hadn't been hitched for a long journey in years, but today there was no time for doubts, only motion. Margaret didn't look back at the cabin. Every step away from it felt like peeling skin. That house held memories. Caleb's boots by the door, the dried flowers he'd hung from the rafters after their last trip to the lake. But sentiment was a luxury now. Survival was the only thing left. She urged the horses westward, into the thick woods where the snow turned blue under the trees. The trail was barely a path anymore, more a ghost of one. But Margaret remembered. Caleb had called it the Backbone Trail, winding through the pines, hidden from prying eyes and patrols. Nayeli sat beside her, silent, hunched beneath a blanket. Her breaths were labored, every bump in the road causing a wince. But she didn't complain. You ever ride this far before? Margaret asked, her eyes fixed ahead. Nayeli shook her head. Well, Margaret muttered, by the end of this, you'll have gone farther than most men in this town ever dared. They rode for hours, speaking little. The sound of hooves and creaking wood filled the silence. Birds called overhead, but even they seemed to know something unnatural was moving through the forest. As dusk approached, they reached the ridge where the trail forked. Margaret pulled the reins and climbed down, scanning the snow. She cursed under her breath. Tracks, fresh ones. Someone else had taken this trail. Recently. Maybe a hunter. Maybe worse. We'll cut through the lower pass, Margaret whispered. It's slower, but harder to follow. They pushed onward, deeper into the woods. Night began to fall fast, shadows stretching long and thin. Margaret's hands ached from gripping. The reins, her eyes stinging from the cold wind. Nayeli had fallen asleep, head resting on Margaret's shoulder, her breathing shallow but steady. But as the first stars blinked into view, a sound shattered the quiet. A gunshot. Not close, but not far enough. The horses reared. Nayeli jolted awake, clutching her belly. Margaret scanned the trees, heart thudding. Then she saw it, a glint of metal through the pine branches high on the ridge. Someone was watching. She snapped the reins. Hold on! The wagon surged forward, bouncing over frozen roots. Branches whipped at them from both sides. Margaret didn't look back. She didn't have to. Whoever it was up there, they weren't hunting deer. They were hunting her. The wagon rattled down the rocky path, the forest growing darker with every passing mile. Margaret's breath fogged the air, her hands raw from the cold, but she didn't slow down. Behind them, the sound of hooves echoed faintly, distant but certain. Then, as the trees parted near an old creek bed, Margaret pulled the reins hard. We need to rest, just a moment. She helped Nayeli down, her movements sluggish, face pale. Margaret reached into the back of the wagon for a canteen and noticed something odd. The saddlebag she'd grabbed in a rush that morning was half open. Inside, nestled between jerky and bullets, something glinted. It was a bundle of letters tied with rawhide string. She frowned. These weren't hers. She pulled one free, unfolded the yellowing page, and froze. The handwriting wasn't native. It was familiar. Too familiar. Dear Silas, it began. She doesn't know I escaped. If I can reach you by week's end, the child will be yours. You said we'd start fresh, far from here. You promised me that. Margaret's hands trembled. The signature at the bottom made her feel like the ground had fallen out from under her. Clara Whitmore, the mayor's wife. A scandal years buried in whispers. Clara had gone missing for 3 weeks during the spring of '71, returned pale and shaken, claimed she'd been lost during a storm ride to her sister's. No one questioned it too hard. Not in a town where rich men drank with the sheriff, and Now, now Margaret was beginning to understand. She looked at Naeli, curled up near the creek, eyes shut, one hand on her belly. She wasn't just a runaway, she was the daughter of the mayor's wife. And Deputy Silas Burke, the same man now hunting them through the woods. Margaret's mind raced. This wasn't about hiding a girl anymore. This was about burying a secret that could destroy half the power in Willow Creek. If this child lived, if the truth came out, it wouldn't just be scandal, it would be war. She tucked the letters back in the saddlebag, heart pounding. Then she heard it, a twig snapping. Close. Margaret grabbed the shotgun, but before she could cock it, a voice called from the trees. "I reckon you've got something that belongs to me, Miss Holloway." Silas Burke stepped into view, rifle in hand, badge glinting in the twilight. Margaret didn't flinch. She stood tall, shotgun aimed square at Silas Burke's chest. The fire in her eyes could have melted the snow around her boots. "I reckon. You step 1 inch closer," she said, "and you'll be picking lead out of your ribs till next spring." Silas smirked, lowering his rifle slightly, but not dropping it. Now, Margaret. No need to ruffle feathers. I'm just here for what's mine." He gestured toward Naeli, who had slowly stood up behind the wagon, one hand braced against its side. Margaret's jaw clenched. "She ain't yours. Not your daughter. Not your property." "That child inside her is," Silas said, stepping forward, "and I aim to raise him proper, with his kind, not in some godless teepee raised on dirt and spirit tales." Margaret's finger tightened on the trigger. "I read the letters," she said. "Everyone Clara sent you. She begged for your help, Silas, but you left her. And when she returned, you acted like nothing happened. You let her carry that shame alone." Silas's eyes flickered, just for a moment. "She was weak," he muttered. "I told her we'd run, but she lost her nerve. And then she tried to erase the girl." Naeli stepped out from behind the wagon, face pale but burning with something fierce. "She threw me in a basket in the river," she said. "Like I was nothing." Silas turned to her. "And yet you lived. That's providence. Now hand over the letters and come with me. I'll make sure your child has a real name, a future." Naeli looked at Margaret. Margaret didn't blink. "I got 1 shell left," she said. "If you want her, you'll be getting it through your eye." Silas raised his rifle, but too late. A loud crack split the air. Not from Margaret's shotgun. From above. A branch snapped, and a heavy snow-covered log came crashing down. It struck Silas's shoulder, knocking him flat with a groan. Margaret turned in shock. Naeli had cut the rope on a trap, one hidden among the trees, meant for deer. Margaret rushed to her. "Where'd you learn that?" Naeli smiled through the pain. "I told you, I may be half white, but my other half knows how to survive." They didn't wait. Margaret grabbed the saddlebag, Naeli climbed back into the wagon, and within seconds they were riding hard into the dark, Silas groaning behind them. But Margaret knew he wouldn't stay down long, and now, she'd just made him desperate. Tatana. Wagon creaked as it rolled into the abandoned mining camp nestled between 2 craggy hills. Snow swallowed most of the buildings, but the main shack still stood, barely upright, weather-beaten, and silent. Margaret helped Naeli down, both of them stiff from the cold and the chase. "We'll rest here," Margaret said, glancing over her shoulder. "Just for the night." The wind howled through the narrow pass like a whispering ghost. As they stepped inside the shack, dust and rot filled their lungs. The air was bitter, but it was shelter. Margaret lit an old oil lamp she found inside, its dim glow dancing across the wooden walls. Rusted tools hung like forgotten bones, and old mining helmets lay scattered across the floor. "Used to be 60 men up here once," she said. "Then the silver dried up. Now even the wolves avoid this place." Naeli settled on a pile of blankets. Her eyes flicked to the door. "You think he's following us?" Margaret didn't answer. Instead, she walked over to a boarded-up window, pried a gap open with her knife, and looked out. Nothing but snow and black trees. But something still felt wrong. That night, as the fire crackled low and the wind sang through the cracks, Nayeli dozed off. Margaret sat awake, shotgun across her knees. Then, a creak. Soft. From the back of the shack. She froze. Another creak. She rose silently, oil lamp in one hand, shotgun in the other. The light flickered against a back wall where a loose plank leaned, outward slightly. She pushed it gently. Behind it, a narrow passage, a crawl space. Margaret crouched, heart pounding, and peered inside. Something gleamed. A silver pendant, fresh, not rusted, recently dropped and scrawled on the wall in charcoal. She knows. Silence her. Margaret backed out, blood cold. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. She rushed to Nayeli and gently shook her. Get up. Now. What's wrong? We're not alone. Before Nayeli could answer, a loud thud on the roof. Then another. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, and a voice muffled by snow and wood, but unmistakable. Come on out, Margaret, or I'll light this whole place up. Silas had found them. But worse. Someone else had been expecting them long before. Margaret pulled Nayeli behind her, eyes fixed on the door. Outside, the footsteps circled. Snow crunched. Silas was playing with them. Stay low, Margaret whispered, loading a fresh shell. Then, silence. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. A shadow crossed the frosted window. Then, a loud metallic clang. Margaret spun around, but it wasn't the door. The sound came from beneath the floor. Nayeli's eyes widened. Someone's under us! Before Margaret could respond, the wooden floorboard beneath her heel shifted. She leapt back just as it cracked open, revealing a dark hole, and a hand reaching up, old, calloused, not Silas. Margaret raised her shotgun. Show your face. Now. The hand paused. Then a grizzled old man emerged from the shadows below. Filthy, bearded, with wild eyes that hadn't seen daylight in years. Don't shoot, he croaked. Name's Jasper. I've been hiding down here since the mines closed. Margaret narrowed her eyes. Then why the message on the wall? Jasper blinked. What message? Margaret turned to point, but the charcoal words were gone, vanished, smudged clean. Nayeli whispered, someone else was here. Jasper looked at them both, then ducked lower. You got no idea what's down here. This place, it ain't empty. There's tunnels, secrets they buried deeper than the silver. Then a voice boomed from outside. 10 seconds, Margaret. Open the door or I burn it down! It was Silas. Jasper grabbed Margaret's arm. There's another way out, through the shaft, but it's dark, and it ain't safe. Margaret made a choice in that moment. She looked at Nayeli. She looked at the thin, crackling walls ready to catch fire. Then she nodded. Show me. Jasper grabbed a lantern. Hold on tight. They pulled open the trap door and descended into darkness, just as the shack behind them began to glow orange with flame. Silas had kept his word, but he had no idea. They were already gone, and heading straight into a network of underground secrets, some older than the town itself. The tunnel was tight, cold, smelled of rust and secrets. Jasper's lantern flickered as they moved deeper. Rock walls narrowed, pressing in from all sides. Used to be miners down here, Jasper muttered. Then came the soldiers, and after them, men with no names. Margaret's grip on the shotgun tightened. Why'd you stay, Jasper? He stopped, turned. Because I saw something they buried, something they thought nobody would remember. They reached a fork. One path collapsed. The other, marked with a strange symbol scratched into the stone. A circle, a sunburst. And 2 feathers crossed through it. Nayeli froze, her breath caught. I've seen this, she whispered. On my mother's necklace, The one she left with me before. Her hand trembled as she reached into her dress, pulling out a leather string with a pendant. Same symbol, faded. But there. Margaret stared. What does it mean? Jasper stepped closer, voice low. It's the mark of the Holloway Pact, a secret alliance, native tribes and settlers who tried to build peace long before the war. Nayeli's eyes burned. My mother was part of this? Maybe. Or maybe she was hunted because of it. Suddenly, a rumble. Behind them, the tunnel entrance collapsed. Dust choked the air. No, Margaret hissed. We're sealed in. Jasper didn't panic. He turned toward a crack in the rock wall and pushed. A hidden door creaked open. Behind it, a hidden chamber. Inside, stone walls lined with ancient carvings and a small wooden box in the center. Jasper stepped back. That's what they died to protect. Nayeli stepped forward, drawn. To the box like it called her. She opened it. Inside, letters. Dozens, all signed by Clara Burke, her mother. Written in 2 languages, English and Apache. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She never forgot me. And then, a second sound. Footsteps. Not from behind, from the other end of the chamber. Someone else was down there. Watching. The lantern flickered again. The footsteps grew louder, measured, calm, but echoing in that stone chamber like drumbeats of fate. Margaret raised her shotgun. Who's there? A shadow moved beyond the carvings. Then, a figure stepped forward. Old. Female. Hair streaked with silver, wrapped in worn furs, eyes like storm clouds, and around her neck, the same pendant Nayeli wore. Nayeli gasped. Mama? The woman's lips trembled. She nodded. Once. I am Clara, she whispered. But I'm not the woman you remember. Margaret stood frozen. But you died, she said. Silas said. Clara laughed, cold, hollow. Silas lied. He always lied. Nayeli stepped forward, tears threatening her voice. You left me. Clara flinched. I had to. The men hunting me, they weren't after me. They wanted you. Because of what you carry. Margaret narrowed her eyes. What she carries? Clara looked down at Nayeli's stomach. Not just a child, a bloodline. The last of the Holloway Pact. If they kill the heir, the treaty dies with it. Nayeli staggered back. I never asked for this. You didn't need to, Clara said. It chose you. Your father was Apache. Your mother, born of the settlers. You are both. That makes you powerful and dangerous. Suddenly, a sound from above. Cracking wood. Clara's face turned hard. They've found the upper tunnel. Jasper cursed. Silas must have followed our trail. He'll blow the chamber if he sees this. Clara grabbed Nayeli's hand. You want to survive? She asked. Then stop running. Start fighting. Nayeli's voice shook. I don't know how. Clara's eyes burned. You will, because you have no other choice. Another blast. Stones rained from above. Clara turned toward a carved archway. Behind the chamber. There's one more passage. It leads to where it all began. But if we go there, there's no turning back. Nayeli looked at Margaret. Margaret nodded. Let's finish what they started. And with that, the 3 women disappeared into the tunnel, leaving behind the burning past, and heading into a future where truth and blood would be tested. The passage narrowed as they walked, damp air thick with silence and memory. Nayeli held her mother's hand tight. Clara's grip was strong, but her eyes, full of ghosts. Ahead, Jasper lit a second lantern. The flame revealed carvings etched deep into the walls, scenes of unity, of settlers and natives shaking hands, before they were buried beneath betrayal. This tunnel, Clara whispered, was built to hide the truth. but also to preserve it. Margaret ran her fingers over the stone. These people, they tried to build peace. Clara nodded. And they paid in blood. Then the tunnel opened into a wide underground chamber, circular, with a domed ceiling blackened by smoke. In the center stood a wooden pedestal, and on it, a metal seal, cracked but still glowing faintly from within. The final seal of the Holloway Pact, Clara said. It only opens for the rightful heir. Nayeli hesitated. What's inside? Clara stepped back. The names, the map, and the key to everything Silas is trying to destroy. Jasper glanced at Margaret. He's gonna come with fire. He'll want to bury this chamber forever. Margaret checked her shotgun. Then we make our stand here. Suddenly, from behind, voices, echoing, dozens of boots, laughter. Silas's voice thick with arrogance. Well. The little birds flew straight into the nest. The shadows danced along the walls. Silas's men had found the outer edge of the tunnel. Nayeli stepped toward the pedestal. Clara placed the pendant in her daughter's hand. Place it on the seal, she whispered. Nayeli did. And the chamber shook. The pedestal split open, revealing ancient documents, an oath written in 2 languages, and beneath it, a map burned into hide. Margaret's eyes widened. These are tribal lands, ones they hid from the government. Clara nodded. Proof of betrayal, of stolen promises. Then gunshots, echoing closer. Jasper grabbed the documents. We run now, or die here. Nayeli turned. No, she said. We don't run anymore. Margaret raised her weapon. Clara stood beside her daughter. And as the first torchlight flickered into the chamber, Nayeli stepped forward, ready to protect her past, her people, and her child, even if it meant facing Silas head-on. Silas stepped into the chamber like a king returning to a stolen throne. Behind him, 6 armed men, guns drawn, eyes cold. He smiled when he saw Clara. Well, the ghost lives, Clara didn't flinch. You buried my name, but not my truth. Silas looked at Nayeli. And this is your legacy? He sneered. A pregnant girl clinging to fairy tales. Nayeli stepped forward. Not fairy tales, facts. She held up the burned hide map. This proves everything. The land you took. The promises you broke. Silas laughed. That map's just ink on skin. No court will hear you. No sheriff will care. Margaret spoke up. Then why are you here? Silas? If it means nothing, why does it scare you? His smile faded. In a flash, he raised his revolver, aiming straight at Nayeli. I'll end it before it spreads. But before he could fire, boom! A shotgun blast echoed through the chamber. One of Silas's men dropped, clutching his chest. Jasper stood behind a rock pillar, reloading fast. Guess I'm not too old after all. Gunfire erupted. Chaos. Stone splinters flew. Lanterns shattered. Margaret pulled Nayeli behind cover. Clara, fearless, ran toward the pedestal and grabbed the sealed documents. She shouted over the noise. Get these out! They must reach the tribal council! Margaret yelled back. There's no way out! But Jasper pointed. There is. Through the water shaft. It runs beneath the ridge. As bullets ricocheted, Nayeli turned to Margaret. I can't run anymore. Margaret grabbed her shoulders. This isn't running. This is surviving. For your child. Then, another sound cut through the chamber. A voice. Weak. Familiar. Silas. Stop. Everyone froze. From the shadows, a young man stepped forward. Bloodied, but alive. Elias. Silas's own nephew. One of the men they thought was loyal to the gang. You lied to me, Uncle. About her. About everything. Silas's jaw clenched. Boy, don't you... I read the letters, Elias said, holding out a scorched envelope. She didn't abandon her people. You betrayed them. Silas raised his gun. But this time, Elias fired first. One shot, straight to the shoulder. Silas collapsed. The chamber went still. Jasper kicked away Silas's weapon. "Looks like your army's done, Marshal." Nayeli stepped over, her hands shaking. "I won't kill you, Silas," she said, "but I'll make sure every word you buried gets unearthed." She picked up the documents. The truth had survived the fire, and now it was ready to speak. The old courthouse in Dry Hollow hadn't seen a real crowd in years, but today, every bench was filled. Natives, settlers, reporters, and men who once rode with Silas, now silent in civilian clothes. Nayeli stood in the witness box, hand on her, stomach, voice calm, but fierce. "My name is Nayeli Clara Holloway," she said, "daughter of a woman this town tried to erase, and heir to a treaty the law ignored." Across from her sat Judge Harlan, a stoic man with gray eyes and a Bible on his bench. Beside him, Silas, arm in a sling, defiant as ever. His lawyer barked, "There's no record of this so-called Holloway Pact, just stories and old drawings." Nayeli reached into a satchel and pulled out the charred seal, the documents, and the hide map. "These aren't stories, they're evidence, signed by settlers and tribal leaders, hidden when the gold rush began, so the land could be stolen." "Clean," the crowd murmured. Judge Harlan leaned forward. "Let me see that." Margaret handed over the papers. The judge's hands shook as he read. These names. "My grandfather's signature is here." Silas stood. "It's fake. Staged. She's playing on your guilt." Clara stood from the gallery. "You mean the same way you staged my death? Branded me a traitor to both sides? Left me for dead?" Gasps. Silas turned pale. "She's lying," he muttered. Elias stepped forward. "She's not," he said. "I read your journal. I saw the bribes. You buried the treaty. Because you knew the truth would end you." Silas lunged toward Elias. But 2 deputies grabbed him. Judge Harlan slammed the gavel. "That's enough." He looked at Nayeli. "You've done more than prove your case. You've resurrected history." Turning to the room, he said, "This court acknowledges the Holloway Pact as a valid historical treaty. Its lands will be reviewed and its violations corrected." Cheers broke out. Tears rolled down Clara's face. But then, a man in black stood near the back of the court, unmoving, watching Nayeli. She saw him, froze. Margaret noticed. "Who's that?" Nayeli whispered. "He's been following us since the chamber." Jasper narrowed his eyes. "That ain't no reporter." The man turned, walked out the door. No one else noticed, but Nayeli knew. This wasn't over. Something darker was coming. Rain fell in thick sheets over Dry Hollow. Outside the courthouse, celebrations echoed, but Nayeli wasn't smiling. Her eyes stayed locked on the muddy road where the man in black had disappeared. Margaret placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay, kid?" Nayeli nodded slowly. "No, but I know where he's going." Clara looked over. "Who was he?" Nayeli's voice dropped. "My father." The silence was instant, louder than thunder. Clara's face went pale. "What did you say?" Nayeli turned. "The night you ran, you never told me who he was, but I remember his voice. That day in the woods, when I was small, he told me to hide. That man, it's him." Clara's lips trembled. "He's supposed to be dead." Margaret stepped in. "Who is he?" Clara closed her eyes. "He was once a scout for the government, paid to map native territories. He fell in love with me, or so I thought. But the moment he got what he wanted, he vanished, sold the maps to men like Silas. That war, it started because of him." Nayeli clenched her fists. "And now he's back." Jasper spoke up. "Maybe he wants redemption." "Or revenge," Clara added. "He's dangerous, more dangerous than Silas." Suddenly, a rider burst through the rain, a young tribal boy, soaked and out of breath. "They attacked the council camp," he gasped. 2 elders dead, the rest scattered. Clara's eyes widened. The documents, were they taken? The boy nodded. Burned. Everything gone. Margaret cursed under her breath. It's retaliation. Nayeli grabbed her satchel. Then we move tonight. Before more die. Jasper hesitated. Where? Nayeli looked toward the eastern ridge. There's one last copy of the treaty, buried in the sacred cave. My grandfather left it there. It's protected, but not forever. Clara grabbed her rifle. If he's headed there too, we better pray he doesn't get there first. Margaret loaded her shotgun. I'm done praying. Let's ride. The group mounted up, disappearing into the storm. Behind them, the town of Dry Hollow celebrated a victory, unaware that a darker war had just begun. The eastern ridge stood like a jagged tooth against the storm-lit sky. Rain lashed down as the riders climbed higher, Nayeli in front, heart pounding. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of the truth. Clara rode beside her, face hollow. If he's really your father, I need to tell you something. Nayeli kept her eyes ahead. Save it for when we're safe. No, Clara said. You deserve to know. That man, his name is Elias Blackthorne. Nayeli froze. That's the name on the old bounty posters. Yes, he wasn't just a traitor. He was the man who gave Silas the locations of every sacred site in the valley, including the one we're riding to. Nayeli's voice was cold. Then why did you love him? Clara looked away. Because once he made me believe he wasn't a weapon. As they reached the cave entrance, torches flickered from within. He's already here, Margaret whispered. Nayeli nodded. Then we finish it. They dismounted, crept through the narrow tunnel. Inside, ancient carvings glowed faintly. Symbols of the Holloway tribe etched into stone, and in the center stood him, tall, dark coat soaked, hat shadowing a face aged by guilt. Elias Blackthorne, I knew you'd come, he said, his voice low, almost gentle. Nayeli stepped forward, hand on her pistol. I didn't come for reunion. I came for justice. He looked at her, his eyes soft. You have her fire. She didn't blink. You stole more than land. You started a war. He nodded slowly. And I've paid for it. Every day. Clara stepped beside her. You think regret makes you innocent? No, he said. But I can still give you what you came for. He held out a weathered scroll, sealed in wax, the final treaty, the one Silas never found. I kept it safe, because I knew someday she'd come looking. Nayeli didn't reach for it. Why now? Elias exhaled. Because I'm dying, and because I had to see you, just once, to believe I left behind something good. Thunder rolled. Suddenly a gunshot rang out. Margaret collapsed. From behind, a shadow emerged. Silas, bleeding, limping, but alive. Did you really think I'd let this end with parchment? Elias spun around. You followed me, Silas sneered. I used you again. He raised his rifle, but before he could fire, Nayeli shot first, one bullet straight through his chest. Silas dropped. Dead. The cave went silent, except for Margaret's strained breathing. Clara ran to her. She's hit in the side. Bad, but she'll live. Elias placed the scroll in Nayeli's hands. You've done what I never could. Nayeli looked at him, tears in her eyes. I'm not. Your redemption. I'm your reckoning. He nodded, and then he sat down against the cave wall and closed his eyes for the last time. Dry Hollow's town hall had never been this full. Every seat, every window, even the rafters. People came from miles away, natives, ranchers, journalists, government men in sharp coats, and at the front, Nayeli, holding the weathered treaty in her hands. She wore her mother's woven shawl. Blood stained the edge. Margaret sat in a wheelchair nearby, bruised but grinning. You ready? Clara whispered. Nayeli stepped up to the podium. Flashbulbs flickered. The room hushed. My name is Nayeli Holloway, she began. I was born from silence. But today, I speak for every voice history tried to bury. Gasps. I have here the final Holloway Treaty, signed, sealed, and hidden by men who feared what justice would cost. She lifted the scroll. One official stood up. Miss Holloway, you are not authorized to... Nayeli cut in. No, you're not authorized. You represent laws written after the land was stolen. I represent the law that came before. Thunderous. Applause. Clara watched, tears in her eyes. The land beneath your railroads, your banks, your schools, it belonged to the people you pushed into dust. This treaty returns more than acres. It returns dignity. An older woman from the crowd shouted, "What will happen now?" Nayeli paused. That's not just up to me. It's up to every one of you. You can choose denial or legacy. One of the pressmen stood. Is it true Silas was behind the original betrayal? Nayeli nodded. And now, he's gone. But his ideas? They still linger. We have to bury them too. Just then, power cut out. Darkness. Gasps, whispers. Margaret growled. They're trying to stop the broadcast. But Nayeli didn't flinch. She stepped forward, voice louder than ever. Cut the lights, kill the mic. It doesn't matter anymore because my voice is not tied to a wire. It's tied to the wind, to the fire in the bones of this land. Silence. Then, the room erupted. People stood, cheered, some cried. Outside in the distance, bonfires were lit on the ridge. Tribal drums echoed. The Holloway name wasn't just remembered, it was reborn. 3 weeks passed since the treaty was unveiled. Dry Hollow had changed. Banners with tribal colors waved alongside American flags. Children played where soldiers once patrolled. And Nayeli, she had become a leader. Meetings, letters, land transfers, reporters followed her everywhere. But she wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing healing. But healing has enemies. Clara burst into the cabin one evening, face pale. It's the governor. He's ordered a review. Claims the treaty might be forged. Nayeli stood slowly. They're scared, Margaret nodded. Scared of losing power. Or scared of what else the truth might expose, Clara added. They gathered the council. A tribal elder spoke, voice trembling. They found the clerk who notarized the treaty. Dead. Nayeli's heart sank. Who? Deputy Harmon, Margaret whispered. The one who was always too quiet. Jasper entered the room, drenched in rain. There's more. I caught Harmon sneaking into the town records office 2 nights ago. He left something behind. He handed over a slip of paper. Half burnt. It read, Blackthorn deal. Silas's land deed. Nayeli must not see this. Clara gasped. There's another document. Nayeli clenched her fists. A second betrayal. That night, she couldn't sleep. She walked alone to the ridge where the fires once burned. Wind howled. Then, footsteps. She turned. It was Harmon, unshaven, shaking. I didn't want this, he whispered. Then why? She asked, voice steady. He looked away. Because truth terrifies men with secrets. And you? You're the truth walking. He dropped something at her feet. A leather pouch. Inside, the second deed. Signed, sealed, Silas's signature. Elias, Blackthorn's initials. It transferred land to Silas illegally, including the sacred burial grounds. This is what they didn't want you to find, Harmon muttered. He gave it to Silas before he met your mother. Nayeli stared at it. Why? Are you giving this to me? Because I'm tired of being a coward. Before she could answer, a shot rang out. Harmon fell, blood spilling from his chest. A shadow moved in the distance, then vanished into the trees. Nayeli screamed for help, but it was too late. The man who tried to fix his wrongs was silenced, and in her hands was the document that could shake the entire state to its knees. Rain hammered the tin roof as Nayeli spread the old land deed across the cabin table. Silas's signature. Elias Blackthorne's initials. The transfer of sacred land, hidden for decades. Jasper stood behind her, jaw clenched. If this goes public, half the state's land deals will be called into question, he said. Clara narrowed her eyes. That's why they're killing anyone who touches it. Margaret grunted from her chair, still weak. Then we don't wait. We take it to the capital ourselves. Nayeli nodded, her voice calm but cold. Tomorrow, we ride at dawn. She tucked the deed into a leather satchel and locked it in the floor compartment beneath the rug. But that night, something felt wrong. The horses outside were restless. A loose floorboard creaked down the hall. Nayeli rose from bed silently, pistol in hand. She opened the parlor door and froze. The compartment was open, the satchel was gone. She ran outside into the rain, footprints, fresh. Headed west toward the canyon, she grabbed Jasper, who'd been standing guard. Who left? His eyes widened. No one. I've been here. Wait, where's Clara? Nayeli's heart dropped. No. They followed the tracks. 2 horses, fast-moving. By sunrise, they reached the edge of the canyon, and there she was. Clara. Holding the satchel. Standing with a stranger in a military coat, the state commissioner's man. You weren't supposed to follow me, Clara said quietly. Nayeli stepped forward, heart pounding. Why? Clara's eyes welled up. Because I made a deal a long time ago. The man beside her smirked. She was our informant from the start, embedded, trusted, effective. Nayeli's voice broke. You knew my mother. You raised me, Clara nodded, crying now. And I loved you, but I also believed peace could only come with compromise. Jasper raised his rifle. Give us the satchel, Clara. She didn't move. Nayeli stepped closer. You think you've kept peace, but you've only delayed the storm. Suddenly, a gunshot. Not from Jasper, not from the agent, from Clara's own hand. The commissioner's man fell, blood pouring from his neck. Clara threw the satchel toward Nayeli. I couldn't live with it. Then, another shot rang out. Clara gasped, hit in the back by a second sniper from the ridge. Nayeli screamed, dragging her behind cover, but it was too late. Clara looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. Make it right, Nayeli. Don't become like me. And then, her breath stopped. The marble courtroom buzzed with whispers. Dozens of reporters, legal giants, tribal leaders in regalia, and Nayeli. Standing tall in a plain dress, the satchel clutched to her chest. The judge glanced at the papers. You're submitting an unsigned document as evidence. It's not unsigned, Nayeli replied, voice clear. It's signed in the blood of stolen generations. Gasps, murmurs. Margaret and Jasper sat behind her. The judge motioned to the gallery. And what exactly are you asking the state to do? Nayeli stepped forward. Return the land. Recognize the treaty. Restore what can be restored. The state attorney chuckled. Your Honor, this is theater. The Holloway Treaty was declared invalid over a century ago. But not repealed, Nayeli interrupted. Only ignored. The judge raised an eyebrow. Order, he said, pounding the gavel lightly. Suddenly, doors flew open. A man stormed in. Tall, black coat, stern jawline. Elias Blackthorne's grandson. He held something in his hand. I have a statement, he said. Whispers grew louder. The judge allowed it. He walked up to Nayeli and handed her a sealed envelope. My grandfather left this. I found it 2 days ago in a hidden drawer of his desk. He confessed everything. Nayeli opened it. Inside, a full confession. Silas and Elias conspired. Paid off officials. Hid the original Holloway Treaty. He wanted it read if truth ever reached this room, the grandson said. The judge read it. Silence blanketed the chamber. Then he spoke. This Court acknowledges the Holloway Treaty and the evidence provided. A full review of tribal land claims will commence immediately. Cheers exploded. But then, outside, gunshots. Crowds screamed. Margaret looked out the window. State militia. They're trying to shut it down. Nayeli ran to the front doors and froze. People weren't running away. They were standing there, ground, native men on horseback, women with banners, journalists filming live, a wall of voices, of history, and for the first time in 150 years, no one backed down. Nayeli stepped out, raising the treaty above her head. Alex's voiceover kicks in. They tried to erase the truth, but truth has a way of surviving. And when one voice dares to speak, 1,000 more rise with it. Months later, Dry Hollow no longer lived in silence. Where once lay scorched earth, now grew wildflowers. The burial grounds, once hidden and fenced off, had been reclaimed. Children played under cedar trees. Elders sang the old songs, voices unshaken, and, at the center of it all, Nayeli. She stood before a crowd of thousands, on the same ridge where her mother once hid from the world. Now, the world listened. My mother once whispered to me, she began, that memory is not just what we keep in our minds, it's the land beneath our feet, the rivers that remember, the winds that still carry names long forgotten. She paused, then raised a carved wooden box. Inside it, Clara's locket, Harmon's blood-stained badge, a shred of the original treaty. I've buried nothing. I've burned nothing. I want the world to see what truth costs and why it's worth everything. The crowd stood in silence. Tears streamed down Margaret's face. Jasper placed a gentle hand on Nayeli's shoulder. I always believed stories were stronger than guns, he whispered. Today you proved it. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the canyons, bonfires were lit across the valley. Dances began, and far away in the state capital, land was being signed back to tribes. Nayeli sat alone under the stars, gazing. At the sky, a child approached her. Black hair, green eyes. Miss Nayeli? He asked. Yes, little one? Will they try to take it again someday? She looked into his innocent eyes. Maybe, she said softly. But next time, there'll be thousands like me. The boy smiled, then ran off to dance by the fire. Alex's voice closes the tale. In a world where greed buries the past, sometimes it takes one brave soul to dig it back up and plant something new. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Luminous Tales, because stories like this deserve to be remembered.